die every year from overdosing. It's about the prisoner. The U.S. leads the world in the total number of incarcerations with more than 2 million people. At every Arkansan, our vision is to see more people chasing their God-given dreams. And far too often, those dreams are sidelined because of the zip code you're born in more than anything else. And so we're blessed to be able to host First and 45 with Coach Fitzhill, because all these facts I just mentioned are contributing factors to one factor that we've got to change, and that's the number one cause of death for a black male 0 to 44 is homicide. And we're going to be talking about incarceration tonight. We're going to be talking about some opportunities that are out there to try to avoid a lot of this. But for many of the 2 million people who are currently incarcerated, there's not a lot of opportunities for them. 4.5 or 4 to 5% of our prison population will never experience life outside prison. But that other group, they're going to be coming out. This is 40% higher than it was in the 80s. So pretty proportional to what we've talked about, the rise in violent crimes and the rise in incarceration.
And that speaks to that data point that I brought out last week, that the incarceration rate and that's tied to the homicide rate that increased from the decade of the 60s to the 70s by 81%. Now, that's why the prison population has increased at that level, because the homicide rate in the African-American community went linear for 81%. So, for example, if you had 40 deaths in the 60s, then in the 70s, you had 80 deaths. And so it's just how that can almost double. It's 70%. But understanding what we're talking about, the deaths and the homicide and the grenade impact of the incarceration that takes place on average, 3 will be incarcerated with the death of 1.
Yeah. And when we look at this, we're talking adults here. 38% of those who are released are going to be reincarcerated again. 11% abscond, so they disappear off the system. But when we kind of start to back into this, it's like, where did they come from? In the beginning, we start to get to where our heart is the juveniles. When we look at that, according to the Sentencing Project, about 2,500 juveniles in our country have been sentenced to life with no chance of parole. So they're gone forever from the statistics. But of the others, 84% of our juveniles will, I never get this word right, recidivate. Man, that was a hard word for me. I don't know why. But, and when you look at that, when 84% of our juveniles are returning to prison, that explains why we need more beds in our state. That explains why in the world we look at this increase in adult incarcerations. And what we really kind of want to talk about tonight is this juvenile thing. I got a call from Michael O'Leary, who's with Arkansas Learning Network, and they've got a private school that does learns and all that. And he's got a heart for our kids. And he was calling me today because he says there's still a little bit of Learns Act money till the 15th. We got a few slots that we're trying to fill. So if you're a parent out there looking for a place that you can do homeschool online and all the craziness and all that, you can kind of clip out of this. Arkansas Learning Network has got some slots available. But he was at DYS over education for a lot of years. And as we were kind of talking, and we're going to have to kind of come back to it, we're not going to get ahead of our adult incarceration until we get ahead of our juvenile intake side of things, till we come up with these interventions. And so that's why we've got our guest tonight, Miss Casey Moat, in the building, ready to go. We were arguing over your official title earlier. It's going to be on Facebook, and it's probably going to be wrong, but you're with the prosecutor's office. You focus on juveniles. She is a Razorback coach, so the good kind of lawyer. But tell us a little bit about what you do and your involvement, and we'll get started there.
And glad to have her back.
Yes.
Yes, glad to be back. Thank you for having me. I think this is my third time. Third time's charm. So maybe we'll really share some magic tonight. And I am Beard professionally still. I'm Casey Beard, and so I'm one of the senior deputies at the prosecutor's office under Will Jones. I joined him. He was elected and took office in January of 2023, and I joined him about 6 months after that, after a long career for the state working as a juvenile public defender at the 6th Judicial District as well. And so my entire practice was devoted to representing kids and working with the families, and a lot of the social work piece is involved in that out there. I can't tell that story without also kind of telling my why, which is my daughter. We did it. My ex-husband and I adopted her from foster care, and she was our foster child for a year before we were able to adopt her. And, walking that walk and talking that talk with her, she came to us with a lot of needs as far as it goes with prevention, intervention, and, getting her the therapies that she needed at different times in life and working through some of those struggles that happen whenever you start out life a little different than what we would have probably have started her life out in. And so that, coupled with the experience I had at juvenile court, I think gave me a good mind and a good heart for prevention, intervention, and seeing where some of the holes and the gaps and the missing pieces of that exist along the justice system, at least. And so Will did recruit me to come over. I started out as his juvenile division chief, and I still oversee that juvenile unit as his senior. But as a senior, I get to have, as a part of my role, the community piece of that, the prevention, the intervention. I'm in charge of all the rehabilitative courts, the treatment courts that we do as well. But just getting around tables, it was something new. There's never tried to badmouth an old way of doing things. It's all anybody knew, and everybody was doing the best they can. But from a prosecutor standpoint, we really feel like under Will's leadership that it's important for us to work on turning that faucet off, to work on the prevention intervention piece of that, so that we catch them early, like you're talking about. And I think we sit here and we use the word juvenile, and juvenile does have this connotation of that middle age group, the middle school, high school piece. I feel like that, at least in my mind, I think of that. But we are wanting to be a part of starting even way before that, because if you're really talking about the prevention, intervention, and diversion, by the time they make it to us, we're at that rehabilitative stage, trying to fix wounds that have already been placed there. And so we're hoping to be able to be pouring in and getting around tables that start as early as
elementary school.
I was going to say, I was going to say teen pregnancy, like you talk about,
the elementary school piece is so critical in our heart, and what we desire for our vision to be able to turn off that faucet is because what we find in Alexander, anecdotal research, when we ask kids to stand up, you've been out there when I said everybody who was suspended multiple times in elementary school, please stand. Almost 80%, 80 to 85% stand each time. So that's a predictor, what I'm saying, of where you're heading, because those kids that we're suspending, and I challenge with that, because I realize you have to keep the learning environment sterile, but the place that we're trying to do is as I often say, when I go to my urologist, and if I had a high PSA count, they're not going to send me home. They're going to send me to Carti, or they're going to send me to UAMS or somewhere to get treatment. That's what we have to do for this population that you're talking about as early as elementary school, because we're being told that something's wrong when a 8-year-old is being disruptive and fighting and saying, you got to send him home. That's not normal.
The identification is easy. Finding the kids that need us and need the wraparound, that's easy. But we don't have a plan in place for the what to do. That's exactly we don't have.
That's what kind of breaks my heart, because and we always go back to, the state of Arkansas will spend $120,000 to incarcerate
$363 a day,
and we know. It's crazy how you can pinpoint exactly who your most at-risk kids are, but we can't money further down. We got to incarcerate to start to intervene, because you look at this Devil's Den shooting situation that's gone on, and we're talking about the loss of life of these two adults, but I can't even imagine what was it, a 7 and 8-year-old that there were the children that were the amount of trauma those two kids now have in their life, having witnessed that and seen that now as a society, if we don't wrap around them, there's going to be a problem. And when you talked about getting to the teen mom, because we're going further upstream.
Mm-hmm.
It's a whole lot cheaper to get these kids before they experience the trauma,
Mm-hmm.
or right when they experience the trauma, versus letting those scabs kind of build up on their little hearts.
Mm-hmm.
Because then all of a sudden it becomes, I'm a hardened individual. I've got all this trauma, all this baggage, and it blossoms, it snowballs, and it gets scary all of a sudden.
From a football coach, understanding having a thigh bruise, if you ever had one, and how you can't walk, but then eventually you ice it, and in a couple of weeks you're able to use it. What you're talking about, I call emotional contusions that never heal, because what you just have those. That's what creates that anxiety inside of you. You don't know what you're feeling when those things happen, and then you just respond, and you don't know why you respond. But that emotional contusion, that it just blocks what you're feeling, and so you just respond. And that's the same treatment. It needs to be iced. It needs to have therapy to move it. When you have that big knot in your thigh, you continue to move it so the blood will flow through. But the contusion won't do it when you see the red there. It's the same way inside, but you can't see it. But it's there. It's there.
And it goes back. I mean, we've talked about the book, The First 1,000 Days, from conception till about that 3-year-old mark. We look at that, and oftentimes we say, oh, they don't remember that. They didn't see that, didn't whatever. But every one of those little moments, whether it's a little bit of malnutrition or a lot of malnutrition, whether it's a little bit of trauma in the home or a lot of trauma in the home, it builds up. And it, kind of like the word I used earlier, was it's that callus, it's that scar that's there, and it doesn't necessarily go away. And if we don't treat it, then all of a sudden it mushrooms.
Correct.
And then that's the thing. When we start looking at it, we're probably going to talk later in the show, but there's been a little bit of drama with some of your new guys that are getting this first chance that the past can't get away from them.
Yeah.
And it just breaks your heart, because what you want for them is that fresh start. But it's so tough. Hey guys, it's the end of the first quarter. We're going to take a quick break, but we're going to be right back with First and 45 with Coach Fitzhill.
As a former football coach, knowing the engagement that takes place on the football field, the basketball courts, the track, baseball, outside of extracurricular activity, META is the best academic curriculum I've seen for the oftentimes socially challenged student. And glad to have a pilot program going here now with Hamilton Learning Academy, as well as Juvenile Detention Facility, to inspire, grow hope to a population of kids who sometimes don't believe that in the United States that life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is for them. And so this opportunity allows them to see that, to feel that, and to engage in that, and to leave here thinking that I can do something that maybe they didn't think they could do prior to enrolling in the META 24 program.
All right, who's the CFO? Yeah. Come on up. Yeah. Give the CFO a round of applause. All right, for the marketing promotion team. Me. One.
My name's Shania, and I make this pillow. It's a baby pillow for babies. It can be for a boy or for a girl. It's saying, be what you want to be. I really want to make a side hustle of this and give pillows to the hospital so you don't get good rest with soft pillows like this.
In the future, I want to 3D print some stuff that will help us in the world. I would love to print 3D houses to help architects build real houses, because there's a lot of people in the world that homeless right now, and I feel like if I'm able to print 3D houses, I feel like architects can make more houses faster.
All right. We're back. There's a little bit of reverb on here too, but we're going to keep pressing through. We're talking before the break with Casey, and Casey
Mhm.
that GBI stuff that's been kind of piled up. There's a lot of stuff that's kind of in motion. And one of the things that I think that we do poorly, especially in the nonprofit space, is realize, man, we got to team up. It doesn't need to be these little
I can
silos.
say amen there.
You can say amen. We'll give you
Amen.
permission.
Yeah.
But what are some things that are going on out there that you're seeing that are exciting you about fixing something?
So, like, that's my heart. Everything you just said is what made me like, I was like jumping out of my seat and start talking about it because, in my opinion, and everyone is welcome around this table, I think that it has been historically a real, like a siloed, territorial, like way of approaching things, and that, again, that's just the way it's been done. It doesn't mean that it was wrong, but one of the things I'm most passionate about is what you just said, bringing everybody to the table, bringing everybody to work together, so that all of those services and providers and the helpers and the connectors and law enforcement, just that entire pyramid of people are working together under one umbrella to solve whatever it is narrowly tailored to that individual that we're trying to help, whatever that person needs best to go from their crisis to stability. And so you mentioned GVI, and that's the thing that I've been working on. Again, Will put me on that from the second that I joined his office. He linked me with Judge Brown in Pine Bluff, and we became fast friends. And he is a mentor and a leader in teaching us how well GVI is working for Pine Bluff. And so we've been working to bring it here too. And that's a funding thing. We meet and educate and talk and tell about that program. And then, I use the word program lightly. We try to explain it's a strategy. It is an infrastructure. We are not trying to replace anything that's out there. It is a way to utilize all those things and help to move a youth and maybe even a youth and their family from a crisis to stability standpoint. And there are 3 legs to that stool. It is law enforcement working one of those legs. It is the community-based providers working one of those legs of the stool, and then the moral voice of the community. That's churches, but it's also the victims groups and the moms on demand and the mothers of Black sons. It's all of those wherever they fit on the stool, still working together for that common goal, that project manager piece of managing those that need the assistance within our community well. And by well, I mean finding the right services, the right education, the right job skills, the right way to get them set up well in a job so that they have a way to provide for their family and have the education to make better income for those things, to learn how to read if they don't know how to read. And so the GVI is a strategy. Everyone else is still working in whatever area that they fit into, but they're coming together for the common good of those that we identify with a way to do that. I could go into it more, and I don't know how much you want me to, but there are notifications as a part of that. We identify these youth that we think are either involved in a crime or involved in the possible retaliation from a shooting that occurred, or likely to get caught soon doing something because we know they're in a ring of people that may be breaking into cars or breaking into houses. But we try to identify them before we can charge them in a situation like that. There's a lot of things that go on that don't produce enough evidence or proof to charge and put them in court. And so we're still seeing symptoms of whatever it is that they're experiencing coming out with them just being acquaintances and around some of that crime. And so depending on how high risk the situation is, if it has been a shooting that has occurred, that is a high risk situation. We would do a higher risk notification for the individual that's identified. Hey, we don't want you to retaliate, or we don't want you to get hurt in this retaliation. Let us help you. And we lay out the thing that they could do, the things that they could do that would hopefully help them move out of that situation. That doesn't mean physically out of their neighborhood or physically out of but get them in a situation where they don't feel like that's what they have to choose or what is going to be chosen for them. And then a lower risk notification is called a custom notification, where you just might be one of the ones that we know is involved in that, some of those BREs, but we can't charge you with anything yet. We would still like to identify those and try to offer something. There's a reason they're doing those things. There's a reason that they're being involved in that behavior. Let us try to offer you these things. And if you allow us to help you, then we're going to help you. And if you don't allow us to help you, you don't take this avenue of growth and betterment, then it will probably come up as a part of the suppression piece because you will probably end up still in trouble and we will know that we tried to help. And so it has both of those. I tell anybody can find something really great about GVI and that strategy. And so your question started with, those of us, how can we help? How can we do that? Those that are in the community, you become the providers of the needs for what those individuals that are identified
the village.
need.
It's the village.
village.
It's
We
the
are.
village concept.
This strategy wraps the village around, and in the hopes of creating a situation where you never are the victim of the retaliation, where you're never at the either end of that gun that is going to either take somebody's life or have your life taken, or even the injury, right? There's a ton of batteries that happen from a shooting. There are terroristic acts that are shootings.
To every homicide, there's 3 attempted. So like on average, if you have 10,000 homicides, you'll have 30,000 who were victims of gun violence.
Right. And
that number is
when we
3 to 1.
find that child that we need to help, we are going to invest in a 2-generation approach for that. There's still going to be an adult in that home, and we're not going to forget about them. We're going to wrap around them, and whatever needs that adult has is probably contributing to what is going on. Not probably, most likely is contributing to whatever is going on with the kid as well. And so with the help of, Restore Hope, 100 Families, Every Arkansan, Arkansas Baptist College, like all these different places. Carter's Crew, we've loved Carter's Crew, and the funding has been an issue there, but we're still going to have Amber Govan helping us through parts of the state. And we hope to bring kids on board with our advisory part of this so that we can listen and hear. We just have to get the funding. This is I'm not here for a funding request, but it isn't that expensive to bring it here and to get our county assessed and to have recommendations given back after they do an analysis of our data to tell us exactly what we would need, who we would need, how many we would need to help implement this strategy. And if you look at Pine Bluff's numbers, before they went live with GVI, they had almost doubled their juvenile homicides. In 550 is what they almost made it to, I think. 550 days after launching GVI, they had 0 juvenile homicides. They have had one now, and I hate that tarnishes it. And that was an awful scenario that happened, and it was a young kid. That was going to happen. One is too many.
Oh, yeah,
we don't want one.
Right.
But wow, to see
that
550 days. And if they can do it, we can do it. And so we're looking really forward to being able to be a part of that.
I wanted to ask you, this is great information, but being that prior to coming to the prosecutor's office, you were a public offender, right?
Defender, yeah.
Defender, okay.
I might have offended some people too. But I was.
So in looking at those two contrasting positions, what is something, how does that benefit you in a way of helping, rehabilitate young people who you realize I was attempting to help here, and now I have an opportunity to help this way. Is that a dilemma?
I have people ask me all the time, like, do you like this job better? And this job is a powerful job, and if you do well with power and discretion like that, then you can make a lot of change and a lot of good. And so those 20 years gave me empathy. They gave me the heart piece. They gave me knowledge, education, right? I wasn't raised like a lot of the children that I represented, and I would ask questions and I would get to know the families, and it gave me education that I never would have gotten in a school with a degree from my own home, from my own
Before you go to your question, to kind of preface it, what was the longest sentence of one of your representation that you
somebody
had?
served?
Yeah.
So in juvenile court, you never serve anything that would take you past your 21st birthday. So I don't have like a number. We just don't do it.
Did you have any that you were represented with charged as adults, or you wouldn't fool with those?
I would only get them if they came back to juvenile after having been charged as adults.
I'm sorry.
So I had some that would have that blended sentence, that dual jurisdiction situation. I've never had one that had to then go serve an adult sentence on that after it, but those are being used more and more, now with as serious as the charges in our community sees. And so I think the insight, I think the level of understanding was important for me from those years that I did that. But now I only ever worried about that client that was sitting next to me. This was what our chief deputy, Kelly Ward, out those core memory moments when they were talking to me about coming over. She said, Casey, what you do every day is you have to represent that person sitting next to you, what that person wants, what that person tells you that they want you to do with their defense. And you are not representing the best interest of that child. That's not what a defense attorney's job is. And so she said, but if you come over here with that knowledge and that insight and the heart that you have for it, she said, you're now working for the entire community the same way. She said, and you can work for the best interest of the community as a whole. So you're still helping that child, but you're also getting to help the family member that is involved, and then hopefully the community as a whole, the victims that are on the other end of that. And so I've not ever sat in any seat, and I don't say this to like promote anything. We make a decision every day based on what's right or wrong we feel in that situation and the safety of our community as a whole. So I carry what it feels like as the burden of every person in there with every decision that we make. That's a big deal. That is a lot of weight. And I wouldn't want that in everybody's hands. I think that that insight, this is where I'm coming full circle with my answer to you, that insight where I've sat by and looked in the eyes of those individuals and their families and heard the stories gives me, it's almost like you hear all those voices in your head when you're sitting there making those big decisions, not in a crazy way, but in a holistic, healthy way about it, because I don't have those experiences always. I have my own lived experiences, but I have heard them and felt them through other people and feel like that we can take that into consideration in our office. And if you have people sitting in an office like mine, making decisions like that, it should be reassuring for everybody in the community to know that. That is what I'm most impressed about. It is a workhorse office of caring about everybody in the judicial district that they represent. And so that's where doing what I am doing now is taking everything I've ever loved and known and done and giving me the ability to then take that and try to make our whole community better. And that's a pretty cool thing.
And you've done it in a tremendous fashion. I Miss Yolanda Harris, she introduced us, and working with her story and Miss Elizabeth Jones. And so that's how that connection made, that we've tried to be supportive in working with mothers who've lost children, because that's something that you can never replace, but trying to partner with them to be able to give through their pain and touch them. And so, I've just been grateful. I'm just grateful God crossed our paths and to be able to continue.
And the continuation of what you said, the prosecutor's the bad guy. But I've been amazed. Will Jones has been at so many different events, not acting as a prosecutor, but acting as someone that wants to learn about what we can do to change the trajectory of this. So
he shows up.
He shows up, and that's been great to see him at different events, different things that we're doing. Someone that cares, and that's what we've seen from you and your office, and so we're so grateful for that. Hey guys, it is halftime already. 30 minutes in, we're going to take a quick break, but don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with First and 45 with Coach Fitzhill. Hey guys, Drew here, and for the last 11 years, we've worked together to build the Arkansas Dream Center. And over those years, things have grown, opportunities have happened, but we've continued to focus on that mission of every Arkansan chasing their God-given dream. And for that very reason, our corporation is actually known as Every Arkansan Inc. We have two ministries that really work together in tandem to see that mission take place. We have the Arkansas Dream Center, which is going out and we're reaching out to the communities. We're in those communities with mobile trucks. We're doing after school, we're feeding, we're doing all those things you know us for doing. But in addition, we realize that the church is the answer to a lot of society's problems, and there's one on every corner. So we have City Serve that comes along the side of the church, and they provide the resources. They provide furniture and clothing and diapers and all these things to the local churches so they can reach out to their neighbors. And together, when those two start to mesh, we're going out and we're bringing the churches alongside of them, and we're equipping and we're resourcing those churches we can truly empower the local church with the resources they need to strengthen relationships in their communities. And that's what our vision is for Every Arkansan Inc. And we're so glad you're a part of it.
Black men have so many different problems, so many different issues. Homicide rate, high incarceration rate, fatherless homes. What is America going to do about it?
What are we going to do about it? Yeah, what are we going to do about it? When I say we, I'm talking to black men. I'm asking us, what are we going to do about issues that negatively impact black men and boys to a greater degree than other demographics? Everybody knows about the homicide epidemic in this country regarding black men and boys. While comprising only 6% of the nation's population, we account for 50% of the nation's homicide victims. So what are we going to do about it? Here's another disturbing reality. While making up only 6% of the nation's population, we're about 40% of the nation's prison population. In fact, 1 in 3 black males are projected to go to jail in their lifetime. Again, I ask, what are we going to do about it? Collectively, black men have the means to solve these problems. We just don't have the mind to do so. And means without the mind is meaningless. Brother, it doesn't mean a thing.
Here, back I would cook until we've got Casey Beard. And in the studio tonight, we're talking about the prosecution side of things. And I think as we kind of look at this, we talked about the role that getting together and coming together can play in all of this. But you also have to be kind of the bearer of bad news because you are incarcerated. I think a lot of people think that you can't have either or. You have to have hardcore incarceration or you have to have soft incarceration. Give us some input on it's the right incarceration. It's the right incarceration because we want to see them come out of this stronger, better, contributing members of society, not incarcerate kids.
Right. Well, and so I guess I kind of have a twofold answer to that. Because if we are really talking about juveniles charged as juveniles, and even a lot of juveniles charged as adults, there are multiple avenues for still funneling them through the prevention intervention piece of that. There's an avenue with an adult conviction for a court to still commit them to DYS instead of the ADC, which would be for rehabilitation. And then there's a way out of that ADC time by having been committed there if they do what they're supposed to and are amenable to rehabilitation and are in fact rehabilitated, at least in DYS's eyes. They can come and petition the court for now a term of adult probation. And we actually try to wrap around not only those agreements for those in-between aged kids with serious charges. The exception being on rarely would we have done that when someone's been shot. So let's pause with that one. But the gun violence situation. But there are still a lot of serious charges that they will end up in adult court on, and we try to wrap around those blended sentence offers. So that is our office putting those out there as saying, if you'll go and do this, we will agree to that blended sentence offer. We even are making a lot of agreements. A lot was a big word. On a case-by-case basis, we will also include the Act 346 agreement where they can have the First Time Offender Act on some of those if they have really proven themselves rehabilitated. And so it feels like a little middle ground to that juvenile court level to us. Right. And then there are still the avenues of a complete transfer back. Some of them have the adult piece that can still happen to them if they don't do what they're supposed to there. But so there's still a lot of avenues that are just built into the juvenile code and the adult code for that. And our office wraps around those anytime that we feel like we can safely for our victim and for our community. Now, as far as the actual incarceration time for someone who is going to get an adult sentence, we have opened up our ears, our brains, our access to us for any of the reentry programs to tell us if they are working with someone and think that they are doing well and that we should consider that in an offer that we're making. We have worked on diversionary programs with even just community members and other attorneys that would come and vouch for saying we think we have a group that's wrapped around this, a support system that's wrapped around this individual. This would usually have been a pen offer, but we would ask you to consider something else. And here's the people that would put their name on the line for this person. We've wrapped around that.
We've done that, but we've worked with a couple.
Several that I can think of in my head. And then additionally, I would say we have people in our office that are willing to listen. And I hear several attorneys say, to the defense attorney, so bring me some information about your client that makes me need to consider something off of the norm. I'll consider it. But that being said, our office is going to always have to be a reactionary, suppressionary office. That is that traditional role. And so we are never going to compromise what needs to happen for the victim and the community. But we are watching out for the rights and needs of the defendant as well, because we're supposed to. It's one of our requirements ethically as a prosecutor. And so I feel as though we are still trying to do what we're supposed to do as the right thing, and the ones that have to actually have a harsh sentence of some sort.
Well, I just reposted on Twitter that they had a 6-year-old young black male was up eating chicken nuggets and was murdered when a bullet came through the window. And I said, this is the effect of a homicide virus that has not been addressed. And we continue to find solutions after the fact, and understanding that the people out there who are instigating these issues at that level, shooting at somebody else, but kills a child. So the impact that takes place in the community, realize you have to fight these on what I call on 3 fronts: air, land, and sea. Mm-hmm. And I say that because, suppression is ground to ground. Then you have, as I said, in Desert Storm, you got to control the skies, mm-hmm. and then the flanks, you have to control the seas. And so that's what we're trying to do. That's the community approach, in trying to take communities back. Mm-hmm. You just can't fight in isolation. And Dr. Prince, can you're welcome with us tonight on the radio? Dr. Prince, are you with us? Is Dr. Prince with us? Dr. Prince with us? No, he can't. He can't. So no.
I think he has his.
Okay. All right.
I can do that while you talk.
Well. Anyway, what was I saying, Drew?
You were saying the air, land, and sea.
Yeah. I mean, just how we're trying to fight this on multiple mm-hmm. fronts, because mm-hmm. it just can't be an isolated way, that we have to have the entire community on board. And so looking at how this young 6-year-old lost his life this weekend, mm-hmm. okay, and the people who perpetrated it, okay, so it's so much going on in that community, that you're living in this environment, you're up eating chicken nuggets, you happen to walk by a window, a bullet ricochets through the window, mm-hmm. it hits you in front of your mother, and you fall dead. And can you just imagine, in the United States of America, why does this continue to happen each and every day? And it's because of that, Drew and Casey, that that homicide is the number one cause of death for black males age 1 to 19. And so we must look at the social determinants responsible for this, and understand when we say, well, crime is down. And my deal is, if you're better as a football team, you're better because you're running a new scheme, you've recruited better players, mm-hmm. Your team has gelled together cohesively, but this is why we're better. And right. when I start looking at the violent statistics that takes place, oftentimes when they say they're down, that's why I like GIV gives you a something to say, these are things mm-hmm. that we're going to do to improve.
These are contributing factors mm-hmm. to the outcome.
The outcome. But it's been a long time we haven't been able to say that.
Right. I mean, it gets frustrating to me, because I look at all the crime stats and reports that come in and out and all that, and it's like, look at it, it's like, oh man, that's good, or oh man, that's bad. It's like, what changed?
Right.
Well, nothing changed. So it's just the ebbs and flow. And I think what we want to do, and we talk about this, is we want to say, man, if we get more people in the game, we know we can change some of these mm-hmm. these inputs. And it's kind of like when early on we were talking about, we can identify these young kids. the 2 young kids that were murdered were on our radar because of some other things that were going on. We knew that there was this risk. And I think what we've got to do as a society is say, okay, what more can we do? What more can we do to intervene on getting the guns off the street that don't need to be there? What can we do from a standpoint of when we see these young men, because most of the time it is young men, what can we do to say, okay, how can we get in your life more? How can we keep you from running with the wrong crowd, as Dad used to say? I mean, I think we've talked about this a lot. It's like nothing good happens after 10 p.m. I mean, those kind of mindsets. There's a lot of things that as we look at this, we can change. We can intervene on. We can get involved in. And I'm not just saying an advocate. I'm talking about anyone. When we look at one of the number one sources of guns, it's stolen guns out of cars. Okay, don't leave your gun in a car.
Yeah.
That one to me is a very simple one. But there's some common sense things that we can do. And I think one of the reasons why you were wanting to have Dr. Prince on here is because this is a guy that in Chicago, in Detroit, in New York City has been looking at what we can do to change some things. He was an educator that was frustrated greatly with trying to reform a lot of the education system. And he looked at it and says, okay, if I was creating something new, what would that be? And he did a great job with Meta because you and I have been on this path. And when we started looking down that path, we're like, man, this stuff, it makes sense. It works.
Radical transformation.
Let's bring in some kids and let's try this with. And there was a little girl when we were out at the juvenile detention center, and it's like, I remember you through that whole. It's like, man, that's opportunity Tina chance. She's playing the music. Must be fourth quarter.
Getting ready for the fourth
That was
quarter.
another quick quarter. And I don't know that we talked about anything. Okay, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to be right back. And we are back in the first quarter of first and 45 with Coach Fitzgill. Coach, we've had a lot of technical difficulties. Yes, I know we've not covered everything in your list tonight.
But what I want to close with is I think if you ask me and what I've seen over the last couple of years, they've really been trying to look at the, prevention, intervention, diversion, that the thing that I can say in the communities, the moral issue, the sin issue, if we want to see over a 10-year period of time, the numbers decrease in a lot of areas, not just homicide, but a lot of areas, is that we must address the teenage pregnancy crisis within our country, because that's what has just scaled over from when you take the 1960s to the day. And I look specifically in the communities that I grew up in, and I go back, the answer to our problem is the history that you go back and look prior to 1960. And I often say, how is it in 1940 that only 19% of Black children will be born out of wedlock compared to 74% today? So the strategic recovery game plan has to involve these specific initiatives if we're going to change. So we're talking about turn off the faucet. These are the specific things that must take place. Otherwise, that's why in 1980, there were only 300,000 people incarcerated in the United States of America. You just mentioned in the 21st century, over 2 million. Well, it's these social determinants that have continued to see these things happen. And we have to strategize around the programs you're talking about. So, okay, how are we going to, number one, look at this factor? This is a crisis that continues to happen that produces the 2% population that's responsible for 56% of the homicides. So if we just work on that specific issue and do not become overly sensitive about the data, okay, and said, I want to help this population, and this is going to change our communities, because I was counting the other night, even in Little Rock, of the 38 homicides, 29 of them was this population. Okay, so if you go back and look and say, and there is a almost a formula that works about, okay, teenage pregnancy and poverty, it says that child has a 50% chance of going to prison upon conception. That's not the child's fault. And so we can't sit here and say, okay, we're going to build prisons. That's the solution, because that's why we're only 5% of the world population, but we incarcerate 30% of the world's prison population, because we are not strategizing the way we win wars, the way we got Saddam out of Kuwait, the way we found bin Laden. That's a strategy. And if we can do that in Kuwait, we should be able to do that in Chicago. We should be able to do that in Memphis. It should not be a kid in the United States of America can't eat chicken nuggets by his window. No, that should not be acceptable.
I mean, I remember 3 or 4 years ago, sitting in the front room of my house, and then pop. I mean, just done there. They just got into a gunfight in our cul-de-sac, and my youngest daughter at the time was upstairs in the back of the house playing video games, and it's just like, how close are we all to this violence? Mm-hmm. I don't live in what I would consider a dangerous neighborhood or anything like that, but this violence spills out and it comes in, and if we're not willing to step in,
correct,
and intervene when a kid, before he's driving, mm-hmm. when a kid, before he starts running around with other friends that they get hot-headed and do stupid things. I mean, this is going to continue to spill out. The 300,000 incarcerations to 2+ million incarcerations didn't happen in a corner pocket. They happened as this festering disease continued to grow, because we looked at the problem and we said, we're not going to do anything. We looked at the problem, we said, oh, we're good over here on our side of town, and it's not impacting us yet, but it has the risk of impacting us everywhere.
Well, you said it last week, though, 85% of our incarcerated population are without fathers. I mean, so I mean, numbers don't lie, and together they tell your story. So understanding that's the fact, and then going back, look at teenage pregnancy, it's like our community, we will see over 10 years, we will change the numbers. Mm-hmm. And so I was talking to DYS Miss Kim Bell. Mm-hmm. She was telling me that in the middle school that they had a report that there were 3 middle school young ladies pregnant. So right now, that's telling you right now what the odds are for her and that child.
That's also when a mother is most open to the support system. If you don't do anything for that mother and that unborn baby and wrap that support system around them, they then become the middle school and high school kids that the moms come and they're like, help us with that child. Take this child. I'm not going to take this kid home. I'm done. I'm over it, because they're so frustrated at that point. They are not as likely to be able to check their own activation in that moment and engage, you know? And so I think we miss so much when they're cute and darling and can't be dangerous, you know, where we see the symptoms that you're talking about, but not having the plan to wrap around them then creates that hurt child that is then a middle school and high schooler that has way more freedom and way more size about them to do something and access to way more things. And so their outward symptoms are going to be a whole lot more than what we would have seen when they were a baby and a toddler and a elementary school child.
And we see that without fixing that problem, it happens again, because one of the juveniles that I interviewed, that's 15 years old, that was arrested for attempted murder. So I sit there and ask about doing an ACE study and just trying to understand why he ended up in this predicament. And he sit there and said, he was 15, and I asked him how old his mother. She was 31. And I said, how many siblings you have? 6. So what I'm saying, if we intervene and help that young mother and bring that father in together and say, we have to raise this child. You don't have to be married, but this child needs both parents. Okay. And don't have another child, because what the data says, they had 6. So that was just a continuation effect that we have to address. And, I got reprimanded by Johnny Key one time on the state board because I started talking about it. He said, it's a moral issue we can't address here. But the fact that we're not addressing it On the front end is why we're building prisons on the back
Well,
end.
he might not be able to address it, but the village can.
Yeah,
I mean, so
I mean, on the state platform.
Right, I know. Not there, but somewhere, right. I mean,
Well, and when it does happen, instead of dogging them out and making them feel guilty, it's like, okay, we got to step in, because we're going to step in today or we're going to step in later. Because what I've seen with so many of these single moms, we've got a young lady that's now a single mom, ancillary to our program, that we've kind of, when the kids kind of ran off and came back, and grandma doesn't want the father involved because it's a check issue, and doesn't want the church involved because it's a check issue. And it's like, guys, you don't realize that a check doesn't solve it. It's people, it's relationships that are going to solve these problems.
But that's what happens when you're impoverished. And that's the key component that oftentimes comes with it, to understand the decisions that are being made, the moral decline in poverty. Because see, poverty back in the 20s, 30s, and 40s, we still had it, but because the family was united together, we didn't have the outcome or the consequences. So, so the moral decline in poverty, right, is what we see the basis of our problems that we're facing today. Because, things that I see taking place with kids going places and doing things that never would have happened back in the 50s and 60s and 70s,
Yeah.
I hear music, Drew.
It's that time of the night where we wrap it up. And once again, Bishop, we miss you. Hopefully you'll be back. Let me pray, and we'll send you on your way. Lord, we love you. We know you got a plan for so many hurting people, and we know that we're part of that solution. I pray, Lord, that people will step up, step in, and just realize that you have called us all to be the solution makers out there, Lord. In your precious name, amen.
Amen.
See you
Thanks
next
for
week.
having me.